Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our food justice discussion today on the Health Promotion Levy, also popularly known as the sugar tax. My name is Lisa Pukoli, and I am a managing editor at Daily Maverick. So, with me today, I have two experts in the field who will be unpacking for us just what the HPL actually is, why it's necessary, as well as how it relates to our health. As always, the audience is welcome to pose questions, which we will include in our conversations as we go along. So, to preface the conversation, I thought I would just draw your attention to the following. Did you know that free sugar in sugary beverages like sodas and fruit juices is dangerous because people don't realize how much sugar they're actually drinking? The quickly absorbed sugar triggers bodily processes which can cause fat to build up around people's organs, make the body resistant to insulin, and lead to weight gain. In South Africa, non-communicable diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and chronic lower respiratory disease have risen by 58.7% in the last 20 years. Now, diabetes is the second biggest killer in the country. The public sector, in the cost of treating diabetes, is spending 2.7 billion. Something I think we can all agree is something that our public health system can ill afford. So, the Health Promotion Levy was introduced in 2018, taxing the amount of extra sugar added to sugar-sweetened beverages at 10%. Now, the World Health Organization has recommended that a tax of at least 20% on all sugary drinks be placed as an effective tool to help reduce consumption and curb related health risks. If taxed at 20%, as per WHO's recommendation, it could generate 5.4 billion a year and fund our struggling healthcare system. Now, yes, last week at the contentious 2025 budget speech, government proposed to cancel any increase in the health promotion levy to allow the sugar industry more time to restructure in response to regional competition. Right, so after that brief introduction, I'm not going to delay too much further. I'm going to hand over to my guests to introduce themselves as well as their expertise in the field and also offer some brief opening remarks. So we'll start with you, Mikateko.
Thank you so much, Zuki. My name is Mikateko Mafiega. I am the legal advisor for Africa at the Global Health Advocacy Incubator. I support legal work for policy change on a national and regional level, where we promote evidence-based food policies. I also provide expert assistance on food and nutrition policies, legislative measures, legal research, and litigation. I also support civil society organizations' legal capacity in their work to push health policies in South Africa and on the continent. I'll hand over to you, Angelica, to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mikateka and Tikiswa, and hello to everyone that's joined in today. My name is Angelica Grimbeek. I am the Policy and Research Manager at the Healthy Living Alliance, or also known as HEALA. We are quite well known for advocating for the health promotion levy that we'll be discussing today and really trying to protect it to make sure that we do see these increases that keep getting delayed and really just reminding people of why it is so important. Really just as an opening remark, I think one of the questions that was raised or the question in the marketing of this webinar was, should the health promotion levy be raised in South Africa? And an absolute resounding yes should come from all of us, that we really, really, really need the government to step up. We need the government to understand why they are putting these health measures in place for South Africans. We have a health crisis. I mean, Zukiswa, you've already mentioned some of these non-communicable disease issues. They are causing death. They are causing a lot of issues within people's lives. I mean, these are life-changing conditions. So we really need implementations in place and interventions in place from a national government level that can actually help curb these diseases and start controlling them better.
And just to add on that, Angelica, and I think also to what you said when you opened this webinar, Zukiswa, is that with the budget speech last week, a lot of questions are ringing in South Africans' minds, myself included, is that we've gotten to a point whereby we don't know who drives the policy objectives in South Africa anymore. And when the government or Treasury is proposing cancelling, the increase when there was a moratorium for about 2 years, who is proposing the cancellation? We are at the point where, is it actually government, is it Treasury, or is it industry who is now running the policy objectives in the country? And hopefully through the conversations today, we'll get to basically highlight some of these issues and some of these delays, because we cannot continue to sit, as you've highlighted and Angelica has highlighted, in terms of the impact, because South Africans who are largely impacted is those coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So it cannot be that industry drives the policy objectives in South Africa. So hopefully, we'll get government to do what's correct.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Angelica and Mikateko, for those opening remarks. I am going to take us back a step and just kind of sort of give the genesis of where this issue of the health promotion levy or the sugar tax is coming from. And I think probably one of the things that people may have a misunderstanding of is just the term sugar tax and what it actually pertains to versus health promotion levy, which I think is a mouthful, but probably is more helpful in unpacking what the purpose of that sugar tax actually is. So I think I'm going to pose this one to you, Angelica, as a dietitian. I think you're best placed to kind of give us more insights on this. From what I've picked up, there seems to be a debate, right, about whether it's sugar itself that is the issue, or whether it's sugar combined with certain other things that becomes problematic, and then how it actually ends up playing out on a health front and how it impacts on people's lives. So I'd like you to actually, just give us some clarity on what is the actual issue there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that opportunity too, because I think it is really important to highlight what exactly this health promotion levy is. And I think because it is informally in South Africa always referred to as the sugar tax, that it seems that this taxation is on sugar, like the table sugar that we buy, that we use within recipes in our households, within our cooking, that we even put in tea and coffee, etc., like an ingredient that we actually buy for our houses. But what this sugar-sweetened beverage tax is, or I will actually refer to it as the formal name, the Health Promotion Levy going forward, is a taxation on the sugar content that is within sugar-sweetened beverages. So you've already asked quite an important question, like, is the issue the sugar content, or is it that it is a sugar-sweetened beverage? And it's actually both, and both of these concepts need a bit of unpacking. So I think starting off with the issue of a sugar-sweetened beverage. So just to be very clear as well, the sugar-sweetened beverages that have been taxed under the Health Promotion Levy are very specific ones. So it is all the fizzy drinks that there are, so all the different brands, all the different flavors, everything. The energy drinks that especially are also problematic because of the high caffeine content, but that's also a discussion for a different day. So energy drinks, fizzy drinks, the concentrates that we reconstitute at home by adding in water and those concentrates, as well as then some milk-based sugar-sweetened beverages. One of the things that has been omitted from the Health Promotion Levy that's also up to debate at this point, and we are waiting for Treasury to release a statement about this and a proposition to actually expand the Health Promotion Levy to include fruit juices, because I think a lot of people don't really see fruit juices as unhealthy. There is this misconception that that is a healthy alternative to these other drinks like fizzy drinks and energy drinks and everything. So a lot of people will drink those rather than water or even milk or something that is an actual healthy alternative. And the truth of the matter is that these fruit juices are also just as bad for us because of the sugar content. And what's really also important about sugar-sweetened beverages is that they are actually ultra-processed products. So again, if we were to really dig into this issue of ultra-processed products, I think it needs a whole webinar in itself. That, I mean, there is plenty of evidence that has emerged, especially in the last decade or so, about ultra-processed products and how problematic they are for human health, for planetary health, just the way that they have completely controlled what people are eating now and what people believe should be part of a healthy diet. But sugar-sweetened beverages, in saying that, is part of, is an ultra-processed product. And that comes with lots of issues. So ultra-processed products, in a nutshell, are basically products that are made in a factory. We don't even really see, like, by the time that it's like processed so much that we don't even really know what the actual food ingredient was that created it. So although it might be in the label or something, it's not a food anymore. It's actually just a product. And the problem with these is that there's so many different ingredients. And if we look at the back of like packaged foods, we can see that there's a long list of like stabilizers and this and that, and all these chemicals that have been put together, along with things like high in sugar, high in salt, and all of these other ingredients. And that actually, this combination of it can actually make these foods quite addictive as well. So there is also, recently, there's been quite a lot of emerging evidence saying that these foods, these ultra-processed products, are addictive. And I think a lot of people in the room have probably at least once in their life said, like, I'm addicted to sugar. I don't know how to get rid of that addiction to sugar. And even though we're saying that in a very anecdotal way and everything, there is actually some proof that these products, and especially the ultra-processed products, are addictive. So just that in a whole concept of sugar-sweetened beverages being ultra-processed products is problematic in itself. And another problem that arises with this, and I think I've already mentioned it slightly, is just how much people actually consume these products. That we don't, I think over the last 20 years or so, there's been such a nutrition transition from healthier foods and healthy alternatives to even beverages, to this consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and other products that are bad for our health. And this really comes from two reasons. The food and beverage manufacturers are really, really good at making sure that their products will be sold. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business for them. Their profits are very important to them. So they have to make sure that there's lots of efforts to actually get these products sold. So they market these products super heavily. And the thing is with sugar-sweetened beverages is a lot of people might forget that they are bad for us because everyone drinks them, from a little 1-year-old all the way to the elderly. So it's not like something like tobacco or alcohol that actually is also taxed with excise taxes in South Africa, that like we know as society is bad, children shouldn't have these products. But because we're giving these products to children, they market it so heavily. And I'll use the example of like energy drinks, where energy drinks are marketed by sports stars or sports teams that everyone knows and loves. So there's that weird disconnect of, is this a bad product for me or is this not, especially if they're getting marketed very cleverly towards me. And then at the end, on the other side of the scale, they're just super accessible. I mean, we can buy sugar-sweetened beverages everywhere, whether it's in supermarkets, on the streets, spaza shops, schools, vending machines. I mean, they're everywhere, even on transport systems. Like they really are everywhere. So it's quite difficult to escape it as a consumer. So really just looking at why is this such an issue is quite important to unpack, whether it's the reason it's an ultra-processed food, or that we need to also just understand why the Treasury did decide in 2018 to implement something to actually control sugar-sweetened beverage intake. So I can quickly pause if we want to reflect, and then I can even go into the details of the actual sugar content.
Yeah, I actually just want to ask a follow-up question on that, and thank you so much for giving a comprehensive answer to, is it sugar itself that's bad? Is it a combination? But I do want to say, and probably what other people are thinking is that, but it tastes so good. Can't be bad for you, right? And what is your answer to that as a dietitian? And when I ask that question, I'd like for you to kind of give us or sketch, an image of what happens to a person's body, when the effect of that starts to actually take hold, and how that then, ends up being this public health crisis that we actually are in the midst of talking about now. So,
Yeah, so that's very important. And I mean, of course, the manufacturers, again, they want to sell these products, so they're going to make it as tasty as possible. And one way to make something tasty is to add sugar to it. I mean, we know that the sweet taste is very nice. And again, especially for like younger people, that like younger children, to get them hooked on sugary drinks from a young age is a very clever marketing tactic in a sense to get consumers for life. So we really do need to also remember that the risk is not just for the adults that are often the people that develop the diseases, even though younger adolescents are starting to develop non-communicable diseases, that we need to see this as an issue from childhood all the way up to the elderly. But going into why now the sugar content is specifically taxed as well within these sugar-sweetened beverages, that is very important. And there's certain elements that we do need to unpack. So, for example, the starting point is that, I mean, you mentioned already that the issue is free sugars, and free sugars are found in the sugary beverages, the manufactured ones, as well as even in fruit juices. So basically, these free sugars are the added sugars that's put into these drinks. And the World Health Organization has actually recommended that less than 10% or less than 5%, but ideally less than 5% should actually of our energy intake every day can come from free sugars. Not to say that we should be having any free sugars, though. They actually would say zero, but obviously realistically the free sugars are in products and things that people eat. So we really do need to limit them as much as possible. And just to put that in a bit of perspective, so that means about 12 teaspoons for an adult of sugar and then 9 teaspoons for a child. And again, this is now maximum levels. We shouldn't actually be having any free sugars. But if we look at a can of fizzy drink, I mean, usually, even with all of these reductions that we've seen in the amount of sugar that's in them, there's still about 40 grams in a can, which is about 10 teaspoons. So even just one can of these drinks already reaches our daily like maximum limit that we should be having with free sugars. And the issue again with free sugars, if we do have it in excess amounts, then it can increase the risk of weight gain, which then increases our risk of obesity and overweight. And then that also leads to that increased risk of developing NCD. So specifically ones like diabetes, hypertension, cancers, dental issues as well that we often sometimes forget. And even high cholesterol. And we know that, I mean, most South Africans and people listening in on this webinar either probably have one of those conditions or have a family member that these aren't new conditions to us anymore. I think we are very well aware of them. Another issue with the specific sugar that's in sugar-sweetened beverages is that it's in a liquid form. So the liquid form is metabolized differently and absorbed differently in our bodies than solid sugar. So it's very, very quickly absorbed by our livers, which then affects our blood chemistry. It increases our cholesterol, and it actually it affects the metabolites and our metabolism. So that again just has a direct link with increasing the risk of higher blood pressure, of inflammation and other things that then lead to, again, those non-communicable diseases. And also then finally, I mean, we know that these sugar-sweetened beverages, they're called empty calories. So what that means is that there's not any nutrient benefit to them, but we're actually just dumping a lot of energy in our bodies through the high content of sugar, because we know that sugar is very high in energy. But there's no vitamins, minerals, anything else that's actually beneficial for our body. So that's really problematic. And a lot of people will not compensate for the amount of sugar that they've received by drinking a sugary drink with then changing something in their diet for the day to reduce the amount of other sugar. So obviously with that just comes, again, that increased risk of weight gain because of the high amounts of energy that we develop or that we have consumed. So I mean, with all of that, I mean, I've mentioned these non-communicable diseases, and South Africa really is in a health crisis, and it has been for many years. And that is why this Health Promotion Levy was implemented. We need to do something. We need the government to really take control of it in some way to be able to really help curb this issue. I mean, these diseases are life-changing. To be to be told that you have diabetes or hypertension or high cholesterol, have developed any kind of heart disease or anything like that, you have to change so many aspects of your life to treat it. You have to all of a sudden have medical literacy to understand the drugs that you have to take. You have to understand nutrition literacy. You have to make big lifestyle changes. So that classic medical term applies here is prevention is better than cure, and we need a preventative measure like the Health Promotion Levy in place and implemented at the best level to be able to see the results we want to see.
Thanks for that, Angelica. And I think this is the opportune moment to bring Mikateko in here. Mikateko, you being the legal expert that you are, policy expert, I want to go back to the issue, that our Constitution guarantees the right to nutritious and sufficient food, right? And I think that's a good departure point for us to also kind of look at why this health promotion levy is so important. And, Angelica has outlined just, how their UPFs have proliferated, particularly in the country and within lower income sort of households. Now, my question here is that what becomes the policy imperative in terms of intervention on government's part around this actual issue? What are they compelled, to intervene and do, basing it, on that all-important right that's enshrined in our Constitution? What would you say on that?
Thank you, Zikiso. I think the government has to push for policies that improve the health and the lives of all South Africans. Policies, regulations, and laws that create a healthy food environment, because South Africans make choices based on what's accessible to them, and they live in the realities of the food environment in which they exist in. And also, for example, to link it to what Angelica said earlier on, that it doesn't matter where you are in the country, somehow you're able to find, a sugar beverage. Yet there's still parts of this country where you can walk into a parcel shop and you'll find a sugar-sweetened beverage, but you won't find water and you can't access water. And we also need to move away from looking at the issue as an individual choice one, and as we need an enabling environment. And that starts with policies such as HPL, and other policies that promote health and healthy environment, like front of pack warning labels, and stuff like that. So for me here is that government needs to work together to ensure that, South Africans are able to live in an environment where they have access to healthier foods, or the food that they have access to has low sugar content in it. And this policy objective needs to be driven by government and not by industry, right? So this comes into a lot of the things that is currently happening with the HPL right now, where we see it as being under threat, because this was, as it's called, the Health Promotion Levy, put in place by the South African government, pushed by the Department of Health to, reduce the sugar content, to tackle the issues of non-communicable diseases in South Africa, because at this point, we have a crisis on our hands. And at the end of the day, it's going to be South Africans, everyday South Africans, and poor South Africans that have to bear the brunt of it. And we have these multinational companies or these big corporations who then take the profits and leave the public sector, the health sector, which is already struggling with having to manage non-communicable diseases. So the mandate for government department, especially the Department of Health, is that they need to continue to put forward and strengthen, sustain, and protect health regulations and health policies that ensure a healthy food environment, and that ensure that all South Africans are not seen as just numbers on spreadsheets who are here to consume these unhealthy foods for the benefit of industries when their livelihoods are being impacted, and then they're left to deal with the impact and the realities of living with non-communicable diseases in South Africa.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, that they have an obligation to create an enabling environment in order for people to be able to access healthy food. But I just want to go back again to the Health Promotion Levy. There also has been a view that's been bandied about that says, is it not punitive? In a situation where, citizens are already overburdened, from a financial perspective. Now, to add something like an additional tax and an increase to that tax, does this not further burden? So in effect, is this the best way to do this? Is the question.
Yes. So with the Health Promotion Levy, obviously the first focus of it is to promote health, but it also generates revenue for Treasury. And the revenue that has been generated, I think in the first 3 years, it was 5.8 billion. And ever since then, I think more than 10 billion rands have been generated in revenue from the Health Promotion Levy. And that revenue can be utilized, right? Whether it's for the school feeding environment, food, national nutrition, school feeding, or for like grants, social grants, right? And I think given the context of what's happening right now and what happened last week, instead of increasing the VAT, the increase should have been on the Health Promotion Levy, and the billions that are generated annually could go towards those particular efforts. And also, had Treasury been increasing it gradually throughout the years and not just having a moratorium that has been in place for years now, a lot more revenue could have been generated that can go towards, social assistance, whether it's the child support grant, the elderly grant, or whether it's, the school feeding schemes in different schools. So I would like for South Africans to look at it as, two wins, right? It's best for health, it's best for government because it generates revenue, and it's also put in place not to punish you as an individual, but to have industry and to force industry to reduce the sugar content in the SSBs, and also to generate revenue that can be used for health promotion measures by the Department of Health, and it can also stand in the gaps of all these other issues that require money from government. However, we sit here where Treasury deems it fit to introduce or to increase the VAT instead of increasing the Health Promotion Levy because it wants to give industry an opportunity to adjust, right? But the Health Promotion Levy hasn't been in place since 2018. Right? And industry and DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry, have had a sugar master plan for a very long time now, right? And the struggles are being put on the Health Promotion Levy when the struggles are corruption, right? That leads to job losses and other issues within the sugar industry. Their failure to diversify their crops, their failure to, for example, pivot towards fossil fuel, something that they stated in their own sugar master plan that they will be doing. So it becomes a situation whereby it's almost as if industry needs and wants prevail over the health benefits of having the Health Promotion Levy, right? The revenue generation benefit of increasing the HPL gradually throughout the years. So now it then looks into what is happening, right? Is industry interfering? Is industry in the policy-making seat instead of the National Department of Finance and Treasury or Health? Because what we are seeing tells us this. And this also links into what happened when we were first introducing the Health Promotion Levy in South Africa. It was delayed for years because there were instances of, backdoor meetings, industry trying to, have the rate at a lower amount, which is what we ended up getting at the first place when it was introduced, because we had asked for 20%, but we got 10%, then it then went to 11%, and it has been stuck there. And if we were to do the calculation and try to adjust the 10%, it's no longer 10% anymore. So the delaying tactics, which is an industry tactic to interfere with policies, most especially health policies, not just HPL, which I'll touch on it a bit later on, that they delayed the introduction of the HPL. We got the win, we got the HPL, but it wasn't at, the World Health Organization recommended 20%. And what we've seen throughout the years is that it is not increasing, which is going to put it at risk and render it ineffective in terms of the revenue generation that it does for us, and also protecting the health of all South Africans. And we've also seen that there's heavy lobbying, by industry. There are backdoor meetings. There are even instances where some regulations are made available to industry before they're published for public participation, then moving us away from what public participation was intended for in South Africa, because it seems as if the person whose opinion matters the most in South Africa right now, it's industry's opinion and not, civil society, who are sometimes not invited to these meetings. They're not in the spaces. consumers, and everyday South Africans who are mostly impacted by these particular harmful commodities or food and beverages. And another thing that we've also seen as how industry has just positioned themselves and they undermine the efforts of government in protecting public citizens is that they use threats of litigation, right? And they actually do litigate. And we've seen this not only, in South Africa, but outside of South Africa. But in South Africa, we've seen it a lot, for example, with tobacco, whereby the tobacco does not shy away from litigating in order to stall, to delay, or to have certain policies overturned that are here to protect South Africans. And we have seen our courts step up in some of these cases whereby they say that the right to health, the right to a healthy environment of South Africans far outweigh, the right to for a producer or an industry or a business to, for commercial speech or to communicate or their particular right. So we have seen our courts using Section 37 of the Constitution, to limit, some of the claims or some of the rights that were being made by industry because they saw that it is important for those particular health promoting policies to pass for the benefit and the betterment of all South Africans. So again, there are many, many other things that industry does. And we also saw it in the introduction of salt reduction regulations in South Africa. These salt reduction regulations were even delayed by 2 years because of industry pushback and industry not wanting these particular regulations to be pushed. We also see it with alcohol regulations, with the liquor amendment bill that has been delayed, and we see how industry, they uses certain forums, certain organizations such as NEDLAC, I'll mention it, in order to delay those particular policies. And they do that, they use NEDLAC again when it comes to SSBs. We also see it with like the current tobacco bill and previous tobacco bill. So it's very, very, very alarming and disturbing because we see all these different efforts or things from industry, whether it's alcohol, whether it's tobacco, whether it was the sodium regulations, whether it was the passing of HPL a few years ago, and fast forward to now, whereby they're literally just not increasing it. So we need to apply pressure on government to say you are moving away from your mandate. Industry's mandate is to maximize profits for their shareholders. That will always be their main objective, right? Therefore, we cannot have their voices be the loudest. We cannot have them having this level of access and say on control when it comes to health policies and policies that are meant to better the lives of all South Africans. So yeah, I feel like I've said a mouthful, but I'll hand it over back to you. It's a topic I'm very passionate about because we see it happening.
Your passion is evident.
Yeah, so we see it happening over and over again with the different industries that I've mentioned. And it's like, we need to be louder about it. We need to say industry is interfering, and the people who are going to be impacted is ordinary, everyday South Africans and poor South Africans at that. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you for that impassioned intervention. Thank you very much. I think you've made a lot of things, or at least you've raised a lot of points for our audience to kind of think about and kind of be on the lookout for when you talk about industry interference. What does it look like? And also, what are the possible policy interventions that are needed in the country? I want to ask a question, though. Do we need a Department of Food? I ask this because I think it's such an important thing and it really is such a critical area of focus in South Africa, this issue of food, this issue of hunger, this issue of nutrition, this issue of public health. And I ask this in the sense that it may well be it's a Department of Food that pulls in trade and industry, that pulls in Department of Health, that pulls in Department of Agriculture. But, there's a centralized focus, on these actual issues and all these points that you both have raised that are of particular concern. Does it need that kind of dedicated focus? And I think there's a country that actually does have a Department of Food. I think is it Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've looked at. And maybe that, is a possible alternative. Do you see that playing out in the country as a possibility to kind of, take this conversation forward? Because I feel like at this point, it's kind of getting to a stalemate. is this something? I mean, we've got a minister of electricity all of a sudden, so is this something that could possibly be helpful in this sense? What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Angelica.
So I think that's an interesting way of approaching it. And I don't want to say a loud yes or a loud no if that's the best approach. But I think you are picking up on something very important of how nutrition does need to be part of the agenda when it comes to policies. And I think for so many years in South Africa, it's sort of always alluded to and it's mentioned, but it's never taken that seriously. And I think there has been a bit of a shift recently in the last few years where there's been a lot of evidence that's really saying, like, what is malnutrition? Why is there still hunger in a middle upper income country? Why are children dying of malnutrition? And I mean, why is there even stunting still in South Africa? And I don't want to digress too far away from, again, like the Health Promotion Levy when we're talking about this, but it is something that needs to be addressed. And we do need to, I mean, as the presidency needs to sort of come together and they need to have a plan about how to deal with hunger, how to deal with all of these other issues that food is the center and nutrition is the center around. So I don't want to say that we should have a Ministry of Food or anything like that, very definitely. But I think it's also bringing in that approach of nutrition is cornerstone to our health and our well-being and everything. And this, again, needs to start from a very young age all the way into adulthood. And I think just also picking up on something that Mikateko was talking about, just that industry interference and what we've seen also in the last sort of into the build-up of the budget speech and everything is a lot of opposition against the Health Promotion Levy, that it hasn't reaped the rewards that we wanted to see. So if we're talking about like the non-communicable diseases and obesity and these really severe and very complex health issues, it is difficult to just say that one intervention is definitely going to solve the obesity and the diabetes and the heart disease and the cancer issue. And I mean, obviously that's not the case. And also just to remind the audience that the Health Promotion Levy has only been implemented since 2018. The long-term effects of to get the health effects out of it is going to take a long, long time, and it needs commitment from the government to implement numerous different types of interventions. So we're not going to solve everything overnight, and we need to also be patient with it. And it's also important to see what the impact of the Health Promotion Levy has been at this stage. And there's lots of evidence that's shown that it has actually changed consumer behavior. So there's been a reduction in specific areas, in specific socioeconomic classes, especially in the poorer classes. There's been a bigger effect on consumer behavior, where there's been a decrease in the amount of sugary beverages drunk. So that means a decrease in the amount of sugar that's consumed, a decrease in the amount of excess energy that's consumed. So again, that protective measure, which is really important. And then also on the other side, when we've seen the manufacturing of these products, we've seen that there has been a reformulation. There's many different products on the market now where they lessen sugar or zero sugar options. And I mean, it is still up to debate of what we should be doing with these non-sugar sweeteners, because they are also not a healthy option. And again, that goes more into the discussion of what are these ultra-processed products and why do we need to control these products in the country as well. So really just like reaffirming that, yes, there might not be these long-term studies available at this point that are showing decreases in BMI and the association between the Health Promotion Levy and weight or diabetes, because it's not actually the time yet to be able to achieve that. So I think we do need to look at the proxy sort of elements that we can look at of the changes in behavior, the reformulation, and as Mikateko mentioned, the huge amount of revenue that it generates for the Department of Health, for the Department of Treasury to then redistribute into whatever ways they seem fit, which hopefully they will be able to also in the coming years realize that it should go to health promotion initiatives.
Thanks for that, Angelica. I do want to get your thoughts as well, Mikateko, on whether we should have a Department of Food. I think I'm making a compelling case, but I just want to remind the audience that I have not forgotten about you, and I will be bringing you in shortly with your questions, which I see are quite prolific. But Mikateko, what are your thoughts? I mean, would it be worth it to have a department that would actually be specifically advocating, in theory, for this health promotion levy?
Yeah. So in the context of South Africa, whenever we you mentioned about the Department of Electricity, whenever there's a mention of a commission or another department, South Africans tend to be like, oh, just another way, for money to be used or misused by government. But I agree with what Angelica has said, and my answer is also not going to be like a yes, no answer, but it's also just going to be to complement and add on to what Angelica has said, because food is a very political, issue in South Africa, and it's again, it's very much alarming, heartbreaking, or disturbing where we sit here and we talk about, obesity, non-communicable diseases, right? In a place where, or in a country where we still have, hunger, malnutrition, stunting, and food deserts, right? So there are many issues, that center food, or there are many issues in South Africa that have to do with food, right? And that alone should warrant a conversation within the presidency in terms of how do we tackle the issue of food in a way that is not siloed, and if that is through, a department of food, then it will be something that as civil society and other organizations as a country, we would need to support, because the issue of food is very political, and we're tackling it from all sides, and it's something that needs to be front and center on an agenda of a government department, right? And if health is struggling because they have other, objectives, treasury has other objectives, the presidency has other objectives, then it's something that, the presidency has to sit and say, how do we tackle food, in its various forms, and all the issues that have to do with food in South Africa, because it's a very nuanced conversation. It's not just we have an obesity and we have an NCD crisis. We have an NCD crisis, we have malnutrition, we've got stunting, we've got hunger, we've got access to food is an issue. So I do think that it is something that the presidency needs to sit, ponder on, and decide how to best tackle it in an unsiloed way. And if that's through a government department, and that's gonna, be at the front and center, and to move the conversation, to move the issues and the resolution of these issues forward, it is something that I would be welcome to seeing.
Okay, thank you, Mikateko. I'm gonna head on over to the audience. There's a lot of questions that have come through. Let me start with this one. This is from Edgar Hurtado. And he says, there is a misconstructed or misconstrued cultural belief, especially in the poor demographics, that sugar gives one energy. Is it misconstrued? Angelica?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, sugar does. At the end of the day, it does give you energy. It does get broken down as energy in the body. But I think that it's the problem that there's this excessive amount of sugar that, again, something like a sugar-sweetened beverage can immediately make us just get so much sugar at once. And that's why we need to really nail down why we are controlling these specific food products. And we're not now focusing in on the other types of food that are actually healthy foods. A lot of the time we get this question of there's starches that are also very bad for our health because they contain sugar. But it's the added sugar that we're finding in products that are the specific bad ones. So we do need to sort of, I think, go back to the basics of basic nutrition literacy in a sense, and not to say that, I just want to be very careful how I say this, not to say that nutrition literacy is the answer to making sure that consumers have better dietary behaviors, but it is an element that we need to just get down to those elements of those basics of what should we be eating, what should the government be doing to help us actually improve our diets, and have healthy foods be the things that people are actually able to spend money on, rather than these products like sugar-sweetened beverages, ultra-processed products in general.
Okay. Thank you. Mikateko, I'll pose this one to you. This is from Therusha, and she's asking, I think it's a she, should government also amend food label regulations to amend using the term free sugar? Labels should clearly list ingredients in detail and their effect on health.
Ah, thank you for that question. So currently we have draft regulations on front of pack warning labels, and these regulations are intended to just make information more accessible, right? So that South Africans are able to know what's in their food. Because what we found is that with back of pack labeling that lists the ingredients and stuff like that, sometimes South Africans don't understand. And this is not limited to South Africans only, but the lay individual might not understand, what all of those ingredients are, and they're sometimes very small and they can't be read. In the country where we have 12 official languages, they might not be accessible to quite a large number of people in the population. So, for example, one of the warning labels that we'll have if these draft regulations are passed is that there will be a front of pack warning label for products that are high in salt. There will be like a salt shaker, and we found that people see sodium at the back of a label that says this particular product might contain sodium, but not making the correlation that sodium is actual salt. And I won't get into science of sodium and all of those things, but so front of pack warning labels are another, form of regulations that the Department of Health has introduced that will complement or supplement, HPL, because it's not just HPL alone. So there are other, health promotion and pro-health policies that should be introduced together with, HPL. And one of those particular policies currently that South Africa is busy with is front of pack warning labels. And one of the intention is to make sure that South Africans know what's in their food and they're able to pick up a product, look at it, without having to Google anything and be able to understand and know what exactly is in their food. So I would urge, South Africans to, to push and support, regulations like the front of pack warning labels that we currently have, so that government does not tire, government does not, feel the industry pressure to be too much where they end up introducing, regulations or certain provisions that are not best practice. So I would say that there are those regulations that are currently underway, and a perfect example of said regulations is front of pack warning labels that the Department of Health is currently busy with.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question. I'll pose this one to you, Angelica. Emerson Rasengani is asking, I want to know from the panel, what happens if we go back to eating raw sugarcane?
I mean, in what way, like if I were to, could ask that question again about that, it's just in what way, for what point would there be to be eating this raw sugar cane? And again, it's just that I want to highlight that misconception of something like the Health Promotion Levy, that it's not taxing sugar, it's not taxing the raw sugar cane either. It's taxing how that sugar cane eventually ends up in your sugar-sweetened beverage, which is again very important, because these sugar-sweetened beverages are not supposed to be part of our diets. They have no benefit to our diets, although they are so readily available. They're on everyone's grocery lists and everything. And so that's maybe the way I could answer that. There is other foods that, again, they contain sugar that we do need to actually have, like a lot of our fruits and vegetables and things like that. And those are different types of sugar. But as we are reminded, is just that sugar-sweetened beverages contain these free sugars, these added sugars that are put into these products that are problematic. And that is what we need to maybe focus in on when we're thinking of why tax the issue, because it does seem scary. I mean, a health tax does seem scary for the general consumer to understand why more things need to be taxed. It's something that is difficult to support. It's difficult to understand. So just bringing it back to the basics of, we are trying to make sure that, well, actually, I should say Treasury and the government is actually trying to make sure that we curb this unhealthy food consumption of unhealthy products. So that's really, really important. So I don't want to get into the debate of whether we should still be munching on sugarcane or not.
Okay, I hope that somewhat answers Emerson's question. So just in terms of industry, and another point that was touched on around some of the arguments that is made by industry, and something that was brought up by Mikateko specifically. Robert Bayton is asking, how are sugar companies maximizing profits for shareholders when half the industry is a business rescue?
Okay, so I think I'll start here, right? So we have multinational companies that sell ultra-processed foods and sugar-sweetened beverages in South Africa, right? And when we look at the companies, I don't want to mention names, that's why I'm being careful not to mention specific companies that are struggling, that are in court in certain provinces. And I think we need to be careful to actually not be disingenuous, right? Because when we look at that particular company that is undergoing struggles, it is due to corruption within that particular organization. And what we find happens a lot is that industries or certain organizations that, because of their own conduct, right, that is against the fiduciary duties of directors in the company, right, led to certain consequences. And what we've seen is that instead of owning up to, because of corruption within this particular company, that's why we have these particular issues and the restructuring and all of those things. We point the finger at the HPL. Right. And it's very important that when we engage in these conversations, we are very honest and truthful as to why that particular company or those particular companies are in court for certain cases and matters around fraud, and why those particular companies are restructuring or they're experiencing the hardship that they're experiencing, and why they had to, let go of 8,000 jobs, for example, in a particular year, a few years ago. So I think that will be my response, that I don't want to use this platform, to amplify the talking points of, certain industries and certain companies when they know the truth and we know the truth, that the reason they find themselves in those particular circumstances is because of the fraud and corruption within how they ran their businesses. And that's why they're in the situation that they are in. And there's nothing to do with the HPL. So that will be my response in a way that doesn't result in a lawsuit as to we must not scapegoat the HPL, and if we scrutinize and we investigate and we question, some of these things that are being said by these industries and these companies, we will see that their woes are not related to the HPL.
Okay, thanks, Mikateko. I'm going to get a final audience question. And maybe, Angelica, I think maybe you can speak to this one. This is from Jan K. And Jan is asking, is there sugar in low-fat milk? Or is the sugar in low-fat milk added or just in the milk?
So yeah, to answer that, the sugar in low-fat milk, as long as it's not a flavored milk, and it's just cow's milk, then there is sugar in it, but it's an intrinsic sugar. It's a sugar that's found within the milk, in the lactose form and everything. So that again is not going to be taxed under the Health Promotion Levy. The dairy products that are taxed under that is the ones that have added sugar added to it. So those are like the flavored ones, the strawberry, chocolate, vanilla, all of those flavors there's many different brands as well. So just to be clear, again, I mean, a healthy alternative to a sugar-sweetened beverage is low-fat milk that comes from a cow. So that's definitely not taxed, and that should be part of a healthy diet, to have dairy in those products. So I hope that you can rest assured that there's no taxation on that type.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to use my seat as the chair and ask the final question. And I think it's probably a question that a lot of our audience probably is also thinking about, I think. And really the question is, so what would you like us to do? What should ordinary people be doing in terms of interacting or engaging with the HPL? What is the imperative on them? What is the ask? Let's start with Mikateko. Let's keep it brief because we've got 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
So, yeah.
Yes. So I think my ask is for us to never tire, all right? To continuously and consistently call out industry and to call out the government when we see that what the government is doing, it's not for the people. And to also scrutinize the information that is being presented to us, more especially by industry, because most of it is to manipulate us or to get our buy-in, and it's usually sometimes not fully truthful. And apply pressure continuously, because again, the issue of food is very political. The health of South Africans, it's very political, and it's a fundamental right, the right to a healthy environment. So we need to apply pressure on government to actually push forward, policies that are for the people, that benefit everyday South Africans, and not big business and industry. So I'll leave it at that, being mindful of the time.
Thanks, Mikateko. Angelica, what would you like people to do? What should people be doing or thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'll just echoing what Mikateko has said. I think we do need to acknowledge that we do live in a democracy, and that people's voices should actually be heard when it comes to policies. That we shouldn't allow industry, like Mikateko has said, to have the loudest voice or interfere in any way. And I mean, there's different ways we can do this. If for anyone that's interested to hear more about the Health Promotion Levy or other kind of interventions, you can visit the healer.org or follow us on social media pages, where we do give information about the Health Promotion Levy, why it's so important, what we share petitions when we have them available, that we do also share with government officials when we are following the proper public participation processes that are available when it comes to scrutinizing the budget or questioning it. So really just keeping updated and really like asking those questions that were asked today by all the audience. I mean, it is quite difficult to understand this nutrition element of life, even though we all sometimes think that we understand it. There's lots of questions that come to play when it comes to that. So just keeping informed, and also just being aware of where your information is coming from is quite important. There is a lot of bias out there. So just trying to keep updated, and when possible, being part of this public participation process.
Okay. And I guess kind of a closer to our webinar. Can I get your final or closing remarks on, so where to from here? Now that the Health Promotion Levy wasn't increased, as we heard last week, to various different responses, where to from here? From Healer's perspective, from Mikateko's perspective in terms of the legal and policy front, what should be expected from you?
Okay. Should I start?
Mikateko, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think at this stage, I really feel like we need to apply pressure. We need to organize. We need to support organizations like Healer, their efforts in, putting the Department of Finance or Treasury on notice, and hopefully by the midterm budget speech, something changes, or between now and then, because it's at a point whereby we are at risk of, I don't want to use that language, but we're at risk of not having laws and regulations in this country be focused on people, and South Africans. So I think it's time for us as South Africans to step in, to amplify the voices of civil society organizations that are doing the work, and to shame, government officials that are not doing what they need to do, so that the policies that the people want to see are reflected in things like the budget speech. Angelica?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, we do need to obviously hold the Treasury accountable, and maybe ask the question of, I think the way that it was even phrased in this budget, of why there's no increase, it's very vague. It's not really giving the answers. It's actually quite a slap in the face after there was a 2-year memorandum placed already. They haven't said how long there's going to be a delay in the increase. So there's lots of questions to ask that we need to just propose to Treasury, get those answers. Where are they getting the information from? How are they making the decisions that they make? And to remind them that we need to put health in the corner, like in the center of this Health Promotion Levy and any of these efforts, and keep reminding the government as well as Treasury of why that is so important to prioritize. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's a great summation of a really robust discussion. I think I'm leaving here more enlightened in terms of what's happening with the Health Promotion Levy. I really hope that the audience also really enjoyed this discussion or found it useful. And, we did our best to answer as many questions as possible. But thank you so much to Angelica and to Mikateko for taking the time to speak to us today. And everybody have a good afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.